So Philip Ingram, a former senior military intelligence officer, it is fortuitous, I'm afraid, that you are here with us today, given the news overnight in the United States in particular. Not one but two attacks, terrorist attacks in inverted commas. They haven't been officially designated as such, although some confusion overnight, as you may have seen, Philip, with initially the mayor of New Orleans saying that the truck attack that's killed 15 revellers in one of the busiest streets, party streets in America, was terrorism. Then, of course, the FBI representative a few hours later said it was not, and now the FBI now saying it probably was. What on earth is going on there? If we can't get the categorisation right, there's no hope, is there?
Well, it wasn't a few hours later, it was a few minutes later. It was the same briefing. So it went from the mayor to the chief of police, who didn't declare it one way or the other, and then the FBI, who are taking over from the police, as they do when you've got a federal issue, and she said it wasn't. I think that was a slip of the tongue, and whenever you've got...
It's quite a slip of the tongue.
It is quite a slip of the tongue, and she seemed quite junior, even though she was
why put her up?
The only person that's available. At that time, we were talking of a couple of hours after the event.
Isn't it better to say nothing rather than say something that is very ill-advised indeed?
Oh, very much so, but an awful lot of our public figures are not properly trained, and in the United States, properly trained in how to deal with the press. They should be, but in the heat of the moment, her priorities were not necessarily getting her words right. Her priorities were trying to secure the environment, make sure that there weren't additional threats around, try and bring all of the different agencies, because in America there are so many different agencies get involved.
Well, I guess, but my concern is obviously going back to what happened here back in the UK in terms of the Southport inspired unrest. A lot of that was because of seemingly lack of information, an alleged withholding of information, and yet what we saw in the United States yesterday, when we saw the first pictures of the truck that had gone into that crowd and injured multiple people and killed 15 people, was the fact that it seems, and obviously that this will all be confirmed, I'm sure, as the hours and the days go on, so we have to tread slightly carefully, I think, in terms of what is fact and what is not. However, what does seem to be the case, despite the confusion amongst the authorities with regard to whether this was, or indeed being investigated as a terrorist attack, was the fact that the ISIS flag that now is confirmed by the FBI as having been found on that truck it looks like it was covered up.
There's some speculation as to whether it was flying on that pole at the back of the truck. But
there was a jacket.
There was a jacket over that.
It'd be an odd place to put a jacket.
The actual wording of the FBI report that I checked just before we came on air said it was found in the back of the truck. So there's a lot of speculation around, and this is part of the problem. And this is why it's better if the authorities don't label in a public domain until they're certain, because it creates uncertainty. The labels are important when it comes to dealing with and getting access to resources. So as soon as it's declared as terrorism, it'll go from a local New Orleans thing to an FBI, it'll go to a national thing. And the same in the UK. If an incident happens, it goes from being a local police issue to a national counter-terrorism police issue. That with that automatically brings a huge amount of resources that allows you to try and deal with the issues as quickly as possible and identify if there are any additional threats and keep the public as safe as possible. Sometimes it's better to label something as potentially terrorist and get access to those resources and then prove it's not, than not to label it and try and go the other way.
But I guess we can understand the speculation on both sides of the Atlantic, given given what's happened here with regard to Southport, given what's happened recently in Germany in terms of the attack on that Christmas market, and it would seem that from the point of view of the public, that certain things are muted or dumbed down or indeed covered up. Now, I kind of understand the kind of the inference by the authorities not to allow too much incorrect speculation. But the problem is when it comes then to seemingly almost kind of eradicating evidence of, let's tell it how it is, any Islamist activity, that then immediately triggers the public, particularly the conspiracy theorists, with regard to the fact that this is clearly something that is Islamist, and I think that's pretty clear from the fact that this particular individual, Shamsuddin Jabbar, despite the fact that he's homegrown, he was born in Texas, despite the fact that he was a US citizen, despite the fact that he served in the army, he was clearly radicalised. We know that already. you know, and the ISIS flag and the evidence that that ISIS flag was in place kind of confirms that. I guess we can understand why the public might be concerned that there is an attempt to kind of collude to stop not just speculation, but the truth immediately coming out with regard to the motives of these particular attackers.
Yeah, but the bottom line is, you know, for the general public, you know, if someone said it was Islamist or it was extreme right wing or something else, they'll go, oh, there's a label, right? Is that going to change what's happened on the ground? No. People have died, people have been injured, and there's the potential for more. So for those authorities that are on the ground, it's dealing with the immediate casualties. It's trying to ensure you've got all of the perpetrators so that you're keeping the public safe, and it's trying to look for any connections to see if this is someone, as we talk about, as a lone wolf, or whether there are others that could come in. Those are the priorities. Then putting a label on it to try and work out what motivated the individual and all the rest of it is a slightly longer term issue. So people get, because of what we get in social media and put over these things all the time, people want to speculate, and you get so many uninformed individuals out there trying to put labels on things.
But the authorities do have form. I mean, we're going to talk later on.
Oh, yes, very much so.
In a few minutes, we're going to talk about grooming gangs and the fact that very, very clearly the activities of grooming gangs in Britain were covered up by the police and by local authorities. And seemingly, again, on the basis of not, inverted commas, inciting racial tensions. Well, look, I'm sorry, that simply isn't good enough. It also then fuels speculation that whenever there is a potential Islamist element to something, that the authorities might also then be trying to quell such speculation because they don't want racial incitement. I would suggest actually to the authorities that if there is an Islamist angle, that it is put out there for all to know and understand, frankly, so that we can understand what the issue is and then clearly do something about it. As I say, I don't want to go too far into the grooming gang thing until after the break, but it is very, very clear that covering up grooming gang activity, the same as if potentially the activities of Islamism in terms of terrorism were being covered up, all it does is enable further incidents.
You've hit the nail on the head. The one thing that the authorities get wrong consistently is being proactive in getting messaging out. And you're being clear in what they're doing. You know, that one press conference where the mayor said terrorist and the head of the FBI said it wasn't terrorist, and then it came out a few hours later that FBI are now dealing with it as a terrorist. That is where they sowed the confusion. So our public bodies need to know how to get control of the information domain. And when it comes into the grooming gangs, I don't think we should call them grooming gangs. They're child rapists.
They are.
Grooming is too gentle a word.
Yep.
These are rapists and abusers and
paedophiles.
And paedophiles. They should be talked about as such. My dog gets groomed.
Yep, indeed.